Hello everybody. I'm glad to be here. I'm going to present a historical perspective about the music of Julián Carrillo and especially the Sound 13 theory. Well, Julián Carrillo grounded his theory of Sound 13 through in the idea of a correspondence between the political field and the sensory field. He was aware that in moments of political revolution, art must be also revolutionary. Thus, his musical thought and his aesthetic pursuits present a fundamental break in the year of 1922, a decade in which the Mexican state begins to develop a rhetoric about the process of the Mexican Revolution. Art provided a key pillar of support in the development of this rhetoric and so helped to consolidate Mexico's brand of post-revolutionary nationalism. Although Carrillo defended revolution, the symbology he used to support his theory refers to an imaginary belonging to Mexican ideological conservatism, characterized by its Catholic and Hispanic features. How could a revolutionary aesthetic theory rely on conservative symbols? The most constantly reiterated reference in the Carrillista imaginary is to Cristobal Colón, to whom he dedicated three symphonies: La Sinfonía Colombia in 16th of tone, Second Symphony in 4th of tone, and his first microtonal work, Preludio a Colón, of 1924. The image above belongs to the cover of the newspaper El Sonido 13, a musician revolutionary publication, circulated in Mexico and the United States between 1924 and 1927. In it, we can observe a character who reminds us a medieval knight, Cortés, Cristobal Colón, and maybe a Don Quixote. This character, who is a representation of Carrillo, carries in his engraved sword a legend: "I will fight for the privileges of noble musical art," which holds in a position of defense while the sun is shining from the Metropolitan Cathedral. To dates, 1895, on the site of the Metropolitan Cathedral, the year in which Carrillo claims to have discovered the Sonido 13, and on the right side, 1922, is a fix of the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, a date that recalls the first time that Carrillo's sound theory was presented to the public audience. As the musicologist Luca Conti mentions, Carrillo claimed to the discoverer of a new sound world, and therefore he could easily feel identified with the figure of the navigator. In fact, Carrillo repeatedly said that the caravels of Columbus that came loaded with illustrious men to discover the new world are now returned full of an aesthetic conquest that by of gratitude we offer civilization. The theory of Sound 13, put forward by its author in terms of aesthetic revolution, has a close relation with the cultural policies that were carried out in Mexico in the 1920s. It is necessary, therefore, to understand what were the reasons why Carrillo proposed his microtonal theory in these terms, and above all, to understand what were the specificities of this aesthetic proposal in relation to other forms of musical thought contemporary to this one, because Sound 13 was a response to the demands made by the paradigm of the Mexican Revolution upon the sensory field. This picture is from the Mexican Revolution. It's from 1930. The study of post-revolutionary art in Mexico must therefore refer to the state, not as part of the contextual backdrop, but rather as a productive entity that effectively created the reality, canons, objectives, and ideology to which any artistic manifestation should adhere. The Mexican post-revolutionary state co-opted intellectuals, writers, and artists who aligned themselves with the call of revolution. However, this call came only after the armed process of the Mexican Revolution ceased, with the creation in 1917 of the Constitution and with the end of the revolutionary governments that had been commanded by men who had participated in the armed struggle. Well, we can see here Francisco Villa, Pancho Villa, I don't know if sounds a little familiar to you. In 1924, more than 10 years after the outbreak of war, the state conveniently forged a mythology and rhetoric around the revolution, which became an essential part of the ethics of artistic nationalism. It is possible to say that in the years that passed from 1917 to 1924, the revolutionary rhetoric had not made an act of presence, but only in a very discreet or limited way. It had not yet reached the upper echelons of state actors and prerogatives, among other things, because it had not been necessary the regimes of this period, which were led by prominent national figures and more protagonists of the armed revolution. If the previous regimes had been given the idea of revolution, the essential and limited meaning of the process and movement of the armed struggle, after 1924, the government of Plutarco Elias Calles extends the validity of the idea of the revolution in a way that immortalizes and eternalizes the paradigm. With Calles, the state postulated an idea of the revolution as a phenomenon always ongoing, and doing so converts previously limited idea into an imposing suprahistorical element. In temporal terms, this conversion effectively institutionalizes the very idea of revolution, and in so doing provides the opportunity to establish the ongoing continuity of power as the irrefutable proof of the perseverance of a community that's still called a revolutionary family. This new idea of revolution emerged sometime after 1920, and arguably, specifically in the year of 1925, a year that is important for this discussion because it lies between two different military upheavals: the Rebelión de la Huertista in 1924 and the beginning of the religious conflict known as the Cristera War in 1926. It's in this context that art adopts a clear commitment to the state's paradigm, and so joins the revolutionary spirit. And in this historical moment, the state became uniquely and solely responsible for determining what the revolution was and what its different manifestations could be. And from the state's perspective, to be revolutionary, it was necessary to paint the revolution, to write revolutionary literature, to teach revolutionary law, and to compose revolutionary music. However, to the extent that we think of art solely as a complementary manifestation of higher political or historical projects, we run the risk of ignoring its own identity, the nature of its instruments and objectives, and the aesthetic discussion within artistic practice. In the case of post-revolutionary Mexico, there is art that joins the convention and canon of the state, precisely defined in aesthetic, pedagogical, and propaganda terms, but there is also art that identifies with a critical attitude toward that convention. Thus, in the literary and artistic field, there were various approaches to the idea of the revolutionary and revolution. The treatment of this paradigmatic element in the production of the artist and post-revolutionary intellectual marked divergences and disagreements between certain groups, especially between, on the one hand, those who identify the revolution as one of the rungs on the ladder of cosmopolitan modernity, and on the other hand, those who believe that introspective reflection on the process of revolution was itself an integral and necessary part of the Mexican history. Those categories like the modern, the urban, the Mexican, the social, progress, the popular, proletariat, bourgeoisie, were topics of discussion, reflection, and treatment of literature, art, and music of the 1920s in Mexico. Art became politicized. It adopted an interpretive and also directive relationship to revolutionary culture. A clear example of the type of official revolutionary art, which may be somewhat familiar to you, is that of muralism. In 1922, David Alfaro Siqueiros founds the Union of Technical Workers, Painters, and Sculptors. The manifesto of this labor union, which declared the guidelines of Mexican plastic art, was written by Siqueiros and signed on December 9, 1923 by Diego Rivera, José Clemente Orozco, and others. It was a call to the indigenous race humiliated for centuries, for the soldiers turned into executioners by the Praetorians, to the workers and peasants whipped by the greed of the rich, to the intellectuals who are not based by the bourgeoisie. In the manifesto, the artist declared that the art of the people of Mexico was the world's largest and healthiest spiritual manifestation, and its indigenous tradition the best of all. They argued that it was grandiose because being popular is collective. Thus, it was expressed that its fundamental objective was to socialize the artistic manifestations, tending towards the absolute disappearance of individualism characteristic of the bourgeoisie art. This is an extract from the manifesto. The guiding idea of the manifesto was a social art at the service of the people, in the form of public art. The idea was refreshing in Mexico because it was the protest against the sweetened taste of the theaters and the French-style taste of the Porfirio Díaz regime, which the revolution had overthrown. Therefore, the values that the manifesto proposed were socialist in nature. Plastic art was debated in terms of proletariat, collectivity, bourgeoisie, indigenous. Well, these are some of the paintings. This is from Siqueiros. Also this one. Is Cortés and Malinche. This is another one. This one is from Diego Rivera. This is also from Diego Rivera. Rivera too. Well, Rivera and Trotsky. The post-revolutionary state, especially supported by the policies of the intellectual caudillo José Vasconcelos, who was the creator of the Secretariat of Public Education in 1921, and who undertook the greatest educational crusade that has recorded in history of Mexico, supported plastic artists like Rivera, Orozco, and Siqueiros for the accomplishment of its mission. Hundreds of walls belonging to government buildings, including schools and hospitals, were filled with the works of the muralist movement, for whom subtly political propaganda was not sought after criteria. The state then sponsored the Mexican mural movement as a product of an alliance between what the plastic art considered revolutionary art and what the state itself propagated as a revolutionary culture. Here we have Carrillo, Julián Carrillo, and Diego Rivera. It's near, it's on the left.
So, Carrillo is the second one?
Yes, it's the second one.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, the case of literature and music was different. There we find debates about what revolutionary art should be. While in the plastic arts the state appropriated artistic production, the state was unable to monopolize the means, duty, and purpose of literary and musical production, whereas a result, aesthetic controversy abounded. The debates swirling around music and literature of the time can be generalized from two opposite positions. The avant-garde art, on the one hand, was characterized by cosmopolitanism, universalism, and rupture. These positions saw the revolution not as a neural point of ongoing development, but as a moment of break that served as an epistemological change that brought Mexico to modernity. On the other hand, nationalist art sought to manifest the spirit of the Mexican through the sensory and based its artistic production on an idea of the revolution, which was a conquest belonging to the history of Mexico and connected to the colonized and the exploited. These artists were mostly official promoters of the revolutionary government and formed part of the cabinets and departments of culture. The discussion between these two positions centers around the notion of what art in Mexico should reflect. On the one hand, artists linked to the avant-garde, such as group of los contemporáneos or los estridentistas, don't care about national, or at least not as purpose to guide their own literary creation. They believe that the nationalism that results from their works will be spontaneous rather than intentional produced. On the other hand, the nationalists who call themselves revolutionaries believed that it was necessary to turn to look at Mexican reality and write about it, using its language, its settings, its customs, and so on. They considered it essential that art make Mexican everyday life its central theme and starting point, because only then will it appear as a national and authentic art. Thus, as a revolutionary culture became more and more reactionary and more united to the state, true revolutionary artists and intellectuals questioned that culture, criticized it, denied it, and claimed that revolutionary culture was macho, viril, and coarse. They were suspicious of the freedom of expression of nationalistic artists because they believed that their creativity was being alienated by the state. The official revolutionary culture had a fragile backdrop because it was a national culture based on an invented paradigm of Mexican history and specific of the process of the revolution. On the contrary, truly revolutionary artists separated themselves from hegemony and laid out their own paths and their respective aesthetic pursuits. In the case of music, we can identify three distinct positions: the populist and the indigenist, both linked to official nationalism, and a third, the cosmopolitan, where we can find Julián Carrillo, which, while not denying its national and revolutionary roots, did not support its own aesthetic legitimacy through these premises. The first corresponds to the proposal of Manuel M. Ponce. He's on the right. Who, through the refinement of harmonization of popular songs, sought to rescue and ennoble national music. Ponce postulated the guidelines of a Mexican school of composition, which considered popular as a primary element of a cultural art. For Ponce, the musician's special mission was to dignify the popular sound productions and use the valuable material of folklore in the construction of an own art, beautifying the songs and giving them artistic height, avoiding the vulgar, ugly, and despicable. On the other hand, Carlos Chávez was the main promoter of the pre-Hispanic and indigenous musical nationalism, which stands at the opposite end of Ponce's work, not only for stylistic and technical difference, but also for his theoretical and ideological opposition to the idea of a national art and the place that the popular elements of music culture should occupy there. When Chávez speaks of popular music, he doesn't refer to the whole range of music, popular music, but to traditional Indian music, the production of its living representatives as well as the idealized reinventions of the pre-Hispanic music. Thus, in the ballet of El Fuego Nuevo, written in 1921, it is possible to clearly observe the aesthetic and ideological principles that shape the limit and delimit its musical production. This work is clearly related to the first investigations carried out in the second decade of the 20th century in the field of ethnomusicology. Well, the third position was that of Julián Carrillo. He had figured as one of the most important musicians of the Porfiriato, that is, of the regime that the revolution overthrew. He belonged to the Porfirian elite and was one of the most active composers during the dictatorship, especially between the years of 1900 and 1910. Carrillo was even pensioned by Porfirio Díaz himself in 1899 to continue his studies in conservatories of Brussels and Ghent. Carrillo dedicated several works to Díaz, and he was always in contact with him, even after the revolution had broken out. That is to say, the relation between the Díaz dictatorship and Carrillo was always very close, and this was something that made it difficult for Carrillo to position himself in the post-revolutionary intellectual and artistic scene. Carrillo always was seen by the nationalistic artist as a character who recalled those years when the aesthetic taste and the academies of painting and schools of composition in Mexico had been strained. Well, this is Agualulco, where Carrillo born. For the purposes of the sketch that I am drawing for you here, I propose dividing Carrillo's work into three different creative stages. The first of these corresponds to the Romantic German stage, which dates from the years of 1901 and 1922. This first stage includes as its most representative works, the First Symphony in Re major. We are going to listen just a minute. I'm sorry. This work was premiered in the year of 1901 with the orchestra of the Brussels Conservatory directed by Carrillo. The second stage, which spans the years from 1922 to 1945, I call it the first phase of sound routine or first microtonal period. We are going to Carrillo lived in New York during 1925 and 1928, and in 1925 the Composers League invited him to present his works at a concert that included music from Schoenberg. And for this occasion, Carrillo composed this sonata that we are going to listen to, and the concert was held on March 13, 1926, in which the first movement of this sonata directed by Leopold Stokowski, was premiered. This is from Sonido 13. The third stage corresponds to the hard stage of the Sound 13 and begins with the work Horizontes and culminates with the Misa Capella and also with the building of the pianos and other instruments from Carrillo. This is Misa Capella. So we can say that Carrillo's work underwent a fundamental change in the year of 1922 with the first reflections of Sound 13. The compositional strategies and aesthetic and historical argumentation of its creative process, the mythology created around it, and the premises on which it is built, all experience a fundamental rupture during the 1920s. Therefore, given the political backdrop described above, we can ask to what extent these ruptures and this search for a new musical aesthetic was driven by or responding to the revolutionary ideology propagated by the Mexican state. And specifically, with respect to Carrillo, we can ask to what extent to the theory of Sound 13 responds to revolutionary ideology. It will be reductive, of course, to make inferences that regard artistic manifestations as reflection of particular political processes, and what I am proposing here instead is a reflection on the proposals for conceiving of the revolutionary, which were coming the aesthetic or sensory fields of the time. That is to say, I don't intend to interpret the revolution of San 13 as a product of post-revolutionary ideology, but rather to see it as a system that set out and directed a sensory and aesthetic notion of revolution of its own. And from this perspective, we can ask how the Mexican Revolution is interpreted from within the musical field. Julián Carrillo, as a typical avant-garde artist, felt more at ease on the frontiers of aesthetic security. The historian Peter Gay asserts that the trait common to all modern authors was the conviction that what was not being proved is remarkably superior to the familiar, the strange to the extraordinary, the experimental to the routine. Thus, Carrillo jumped the well-defined bastions of the Mexican musical culture of his time in order to offer drastic proposals. His desire of an aesthetic revolution was congruent with a certain awareness of the inevitable historical development of artistic production. For Carrillo, at times of political revolution, art must also be revolutionary. Thus, he legitimized his theory of San 13 through a notion of correspondence between the terrain of the sensory and the terrain of the political. Carrillo believed that while the political avant-garde involved in concrete reality, the artistic avant-garde should do his own in the field of the symbolic, but always with a political background. However, the paradigm on which Carrillo built his theory was not the same as that of his colleagues, Carlos Chávez, Ponce, or Silvestre Revueltas. The notion of Carrillist revolutionary art is far from being related to the official revolutionary aesthetics of the 1920s for various reasons. While the reflections of Ponce, Chávez, and Revueltas revolve around the social and the popular, Carrillo did not consider any of these topics as a central to his musical revolution. The most striking difference between Carrillo's musical thought and his contemporaries is revealed in Carrillo's substitutions of pueblo for revolution, without any interest in rescuing popular music. That is, his musical revolution never included a reflection on what other composers considered revolutionary art. Thus, the composer José Pomar notes that Carrillo's ideas about revolutionary art had nothing to do with any kind of Marxist notion of the concept, which was for most of at the time the only truly revolutionary perspective. José Pomar...
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Okay. Carrillo's idea of revolutionary art, as José Pomar rightly points out, had nothing socialist about it. Carrillo did not interpret revolutionary art as a pedagogical and ideological tool, as did his fellow musicians and the muralist movement. On the contrary, Carrillo spoke of the sensory revolution, which was in accordance with the demands of modernity. And Carrillo says, "We are in the time of great jolts, of intense emotions. Everything is great. Opulence, misery, degeneration, crime, war, progress. But greater than all this and of greater transcendence will be the cataclysm that will destroy San 13. Modern man needs new emotions." In the same way, Carrillo mentioned that San 13 was a spiritual revolution. In fact, between 1925 and 1929, Carrillo carried out the Pro Sound 13 crusade, which lasted about 7 weeks each year. Carrillo students toured various states of the Mexican Republic, seeking to propagate strengthen the teachings of his teacher. The crusade used as a banner the image of San Luis Gonzaga, the father of the Catholic youth. During the same years that Carrillo undertakes the Pro Sound 13, crusade between 1926-1929, a conflict between the Mexican government and Catholic militias ignited and spread around Mexico. Carrillo then did not follow the hegemonic revolutionary spirit of his time, which was above all declared to be secular. What is interesting here is how Carrillo resorted to symbologies that resemble a conservative imaginary to legitimize a revolutionary aesthetic. How to explain that a revolutionary music was based on conservative symbologies? The matrix of Carrillo's aesthetic and musical and historical thought before and during the systematization of San Martin arises from an ideological conservatism that tried to adopt to the discourses of the national art that the Callista rhetoric of the revolution demanded. The case of Carrillo is key to understanding that it is possible to forge revolutionary sensibilities from within a conservative ideology. Although San Martin was not a musical revolution in the terms that its author considered, it is possible to say that it was an attack on the conventional sensibility of its historical moment, and herein lies its revolutionary potential. Its subversive character is equally present in the act of insubordination to the dominant authority of the musical culture of his time. It is necessary to understand that the reasons that led Carrillo to systematize his theory were largely ideological and technological. We can then say that San Martin is a product of an adjustment of his musical thought to the demands of the new revolutionary culture. We must, therefore, approach this theory always from a historical perspective that understands the epistemological horizons through which it was systematized. For only then we will understand its internal contradictions, its aesthetic riches, and above all, the importance and validity of its proposal in the history of 20th century music. Well, thank you so much.
You have led us into a history of Mexico, which for Austrians is really forgotten since the days when Emperor Maximilian has been shot, and we in Austria did not know much about the years later, the dictator Diaz and the social and cultural revolution, where Julián Carrillo was a part of. He was in neighborhood, as I could hear from your lecture, in the neighborhood of a socialist revolution, but he did not belong to it. It was a cultural revolution he did. And it's a revolution that is going on, and that's the reason why we are sitting here. Revolution in music. I beg your pardon, Mariana, I didn't introduce you to the audience, and I think there is nothing written here. So I want to ask you, you are Mexican, yes?
Yes, I'm Mexican.
And you live there, or you?
No, yes, I live there, and I'm doing a master's, in Mexico? In Mexico, about contemporary history, and this is part of my thesis. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
And you have often been in other countries too, in USA perhaps. With your work, you have been in other countries too, of course.
Okay, can you help me?
Si estuviste en otro sitio presentando tu idea.
In another countries?
Yes.
No, just here in Mexico and in other places, but this is the first time that I'm presented.
I think that it's so an interesting chapter of history that some should better know, I think.
Yeah.
So, and you're well finished in your work, and then got a job in Mexico?
I went to make a PhD, yeah,
and
there in Mexico, also in history, contemporary history. Yeah.
So I wish you good luck and
many
success.
Thank you.
And thank you very much
for
your lecture.
If there are any questions, we still have like 2 minutes. We have a little bit of delay, 10 minutes, but
I think
maybe one question.
Afford this, yes. Other questions?
Is it okay?
Please.
One question?
Okay.
I have a very small one.
Yes.
Was he in contact with Vishnu-Gradsky?
I think, yeah, he was. Yeah, he was in contact, yes.
Okay.
I can give you some, I think there are letters from, in the archive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
yes.
Carrillo has been often in Europe, not
Yeah.
only for studies, and I remember in the year 1952 he got in Germany the title of Bundesverdienstkreuz der Bundesrepublik Deutschland. It was for music and it was exceptional for a musician, and if they should have known then in Germany, his neighborhood, Diego Rivera and others, and cannot believe that they gave him this or the title. But I'm very glad that they did, and so Carrillo is an European too.
Yeah. Sometimes, yeah.
So, are there any other questions, please?
Otherwise, because of the delay, maybe we continue the questions at the coffee break, and then we continue
Yes, we can do
with the next
So,
conference.
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We would like to say thanks for this invitation, this important event. This explanation will be on our original Spanish. That's why we will need helpful for Mr. Davila. Okay, we want to start. Hablar de microtonalismo es hablar del origen mismo de la comunicación sonora entre el hombre primitivo.
To speak.
Si quieres, lo tengo aquí en español
Vale.
para que te lo puedas.
Sí, me voy a sentar aquí.
Ajá. Y tengo el espacio para que voy a estar hablando cada cosa.
Okay. To speak about microtonalism is to speak about the origin of sound communication between the primitive man.
Así como de la misma manera ambientaba con rituales con fines de comunicación espiritual, como ya con inclinaciones netamente musicales, es decir, empleando ritmos con instrumentos primitivos, cantos y danzas principalmente.
Okay, as well as about the environment in their rituals with spiritual purposes, but also just focusing about the music, to put it that way, using rhythms, specific rhythms with primitive instruments, using singing and dancing mainly.
Este desarrollo cultural lo tenemos aún. Jamás desapareció el microtonalismo. Ha sido marchando a la par con la escala pentafónica creada en China hace 5.000 años, que dio origen a la escala dodecafónica, empleada en gran parte del mundo, logrando de tal manera que el microtonalismo pasara a un segundo sitio ante la inmensidad de las grandes obras de los clásicos, abarcando con este término toda la presentación de la llamada música clásica.
So this cultural development, we still have it. Microtonalism never disappeared. I mean, it's been going from one place to another place, going from the pentatonic scale created in China 5,000 years ago, that led to the dodecaphonic scale, used in most of the world. Making that microtonalism would be in the second place, and most of the classical works are using 12 tones, and which has made the block of classical music.
Sin embargo, es en el siglo pasado cuando emerge de una manera extraordinaria para ser ya considerado como la música del futuro, siendo llevado a la práctica con los más diversos sistemas tanto de afinación como de intervención de instrumentos para su interpretación.
But it was last century when it emerges in an extraordinary way to be considered as the music of the future, being taken to the praxis by many of the systems both tuning systems or those the creation of new instruments for the interpretation of this microtonal music.
Esta aplicación se ha visto sujeta a la afinación, muchas veces aleatoria, y a la interpretación música instrumental como vocal, igualmente aleatoria en muchos casos, así como su aplicación definida ya por diversos sistemas.
So this application has been subject to tuning, sometimes aleatoric and by chance, sometimes to instrumental interpretation as vocal music, and equally by chance in many cases, and its defined application by the different systems.
El sonido 13, surgido en el año 1895, tiene como fundamento la división musical llamado 16avo de tono, de la que emanan logros tales como nuevos sistemas de escritura musical, invención de instrumentos, leyes de metamorfosis musical, el infinito en las escalas y los acordes, etc. Aportaciones no contempladas en el desarrollo del microtonalismo en el pasado siglo.
So, el sonido 13, so the 13th sound, was created in the year 1895, and its fundament has the division of the 16th of a tone, from which come out new achievements, like the new system of the musical writing, the creation of new instruments, creation of new laws for the musical metamorphosis, the infinite in the scales and in the chords, etc. Things not included in the development of microtonalism in the last century.
Deseando sinceramente que este simposio de música microtonal dé la luz necesaria al mundo para que se establezcan los más diversos medios para su difusión, en nombre de la teoría musical Sonido 13, agradecemos nuestra participación en este evento. Muchas gracias.
So wishing truly that in this symposium, this microtonal music symposium, gives more light needed to the world, that we create more channels for the broadcasting of microtonal music and the theory of the Sonido 13. We are very thankful for our participation in this symposium. Thank you very much.
Ahora abordaremos el sonido 13 en 13 sesiones que será enriquecimiento, simplificación y purificación de la música.
Mira, sí, hace la frase un poquito más cortita, así es más fácil para mí, si puede ser. So this musical revolution called Sonido 13 was born on the 13th of July 1895.
Desde el momento en que el intervalo musical llamado tono fue dividido en 16avos de tono diferentes perfectamente audibles.
In the moment that this tone was divided in 16 different pitches, perfectly audible.
El autor de este descubrimiento, el músico mexicano maestro Julián Carrillo Trujillo, logra, empleando para ello la cuarta cuerda de su violín.
So the author of this discovering, the Mexican musician maestro Julián Carrillo Trujillo, gets by using the fourth string of his violin,
sin ejercer presión en ella, el sonido musical llamado sol.
Without using pressure on the string, he was able to obtain the so-called sol sound.
Que junto con el sonido llamado la,
that together with the sonido la, or A in English,
forman el intervalo musical llamado tono.
So this is what we call a tone.
Este tono es precisamente el intervalo que fue dividido en 16 sonidos diferentes.
So this is exactly the interval that was divided in 16 parts.
Ordenando con esta división los intervalos correspondientes a un tono,
Ordering with this division the Sorry. These divisions correspond in one tone,
medio tono,
half of a tone,
cuarto de tono,
a quarter of a tone,
octavo de tono
eighth of a tone,
y 16avo de tono,
and 16th of a tone.
con lo que es posible escuchar dentro de una octava
So, with which is possible to listen without an octave.
96 intervalos a la distancia de un 16avo de tono.
So, a total of 96 intervals at the distance of a 16th of a tone.
Es preciso esclarecer que al aparecer 97 tonos en la octava, esta pierde su nombre, pues octava es la reunión de 8 sonidos y ahora existen 97.
So it's important to explain that because now we have 97 sounds. I mean, the word octave doesn't have. It loses its name actually, because now this octave, what we call octave, is not 8 notes anymore.
Por lo que en lo sucesivo se llamará el duplo.
So the new name that Julián Carrillo took was el duplo, the double.
Ya que una octava es precisamente el duplo de vibraciones por segundo del sonido fundamental.
Because an octave, what it's called octave, is exactly the double of vibrations per second from the fundamental sound.
En el invierno de 1917, Carrillo expone la siguiente profecía.
In the winter of 1917, 100 years ago, Carrillo exposes the following prophecy.
El sonido 13 será el principio del fin y el punto de partida de una nueva generación de músicos que vendrá a transformarlo todo.
So this Sonido 13 will be the beginning of the end and the starting point for a new generation of musicians who will come to transform everything.
Pues no quedará ni uno solo de los instrumentos actuales en uso.
Because the existing instruments will disappear.
Todos ellos serán insuficientes para producir la abrumadora cantidad de sonidos que van a emplearse.
All of them will be insufficient to produce all the huge amount of sounds that will be employed.
¿Cómo serán los nuevos instrumentos?
How will these new instruments be?
Eso será cuestión que el tiempo irá resolviendo según las necesidades lo vayan exigiendo.
Time will show us, depending on the necessities that we will require.
Y marcharán a la par de la división del semitono hasta llegar al límite máximo.
And they will go together with the division of the semitone to the limit.
Y como un acontecimiento no puede ser aislado, siguiendo nuestra hipótesis,
and because an event cannot be isolated, following our theory,
no es imposible que se llegue en el vértigo de la innovación en este sentido a pretender.
It's not impossible that we reach the vertige of the innovation in this matter.
Y quién sabe si a lograr distinguir la diferencia entre una y otra vibración.
And who knows if we reach to see the difference between one and the other vibration.
Esta hipótesis temeraria hoy,
I mean, this risky hypothesis
se convertirá en una realidad corriendo el tiempo.
will become true one day.
Carrillo no pudo ver la realización de su hipótesis,
Carrillo couldn't see the realization of his theory,
pero no tuvo que pasar mucho tiempo para que se llevara a cabo.
But it was not long that it came to the practice.
Pues uno de sus dos últimos alumnos,
Because one of his last pupils,
el maestro Óscar Vargas Leal,
Maestro Vargas Leal,
continuando con esa intuición revolucionaria,
continuing with this revolutionary intuition,
fue capaz de construir esos nuevos instrumentos que se mencionan en la profecía de 1917.
was able to build those new instruments that are mentioned in the prophecy of 1917.
Llegando finalmente en el año 1985
Reaching finally in 1985
a construir un instrumento musical llamado arpa microinterval,
to build this instrument, this musical instrument called a microintervallic harp.
único en el mundo y primero en construirse en la historia de la humanidad, en donde se producen 909 sonidos, en 9 duplos divididos.
Unique in the world and the first of its kind to be built in the history of human beings, in which 909 sounds in 9 duplos or doubles divided in
Divididos en 101 sonidos cada uno,
101 sounds each of them,
cumpliendo la hipótesis de Carrillo al poder distinguir la diferencia de una vibración entre dos sonidos.
achieving the theory of Carrillo to distinguish the difference between a vibration between two sounds,
Y superarla al poder distinguir media vibración entre un sonido y otro.
and to achieve it, being able to distinguish half of the vibration between one sound and the other.
Este instrumento en la actualidad se encuentra en México y está en condiciones de ser escuchado.
This instrument remains at the moment in Mexico, and it's in conditions to be listened to.
El maestro Óscar Vargas Leal ideó y construyó diversos modelos de arpa en diferentes afinaciones microtonales,
Maestro Oscar Vargas built several models of harps using different affination systems.
y el maestro Hugo Vargas Olvera, como hijo suyo y heredero de sus enseñanzas, continuó con la construcción de arpas microtonales.
Und Maestro Hugo Vargas, as Hugo Vargas Olvera, like his son, he continued his learning and researching, building new microtonal harps like this one that we are now showing you.
En este instrumento llamado arpa microtonal, que está compuesta por 5 escalas afinadas en 16avos de tono, podemos apreciar 485 sonidos en su totalidad.
In this instrument called microtonal harp, that built using 5 scales, tuned using 16th of a tone, we can distinguish 485 sounds in the overall.
El duplo número 1 o primera escala está conformada por los sonidos tradicionalmente conocidos como escala dodecafónica.
Duplo number 1 or first scale compounds the traditional sounds known as the dodecaphonic scale.
Ubicada en el tercer ciclo de los 9 que existen en el empleo de la música en general.
Located in the third cycle of the 9th existing in the using of the music in general.
Es decir, do tercer ciclo a do cuarto ciclo dividido en 97 sonidos.
C in the third cycle to C in the fourth cycle divided in 97 sounds.
El duplo número 2 o segunda escala
Duplo number 2 or second scale
se ubica en el cuarto ciclo.
is located in the fourth cycle.
El tercer duplo se encuentra en el quinto ciclo.
The third duplo is located in the fifth cycle.
Cabe mencionar la particularidad de que tanto el segundo como el tercer ciclo pueden ser tocados de manera independiente.
We should mention that both the second cycle as the third one could be played in an independent way.
o bien debido al cruzamiento de sus cuerdas pueden ser tocados de manera conjunta.
Or, because of the crossing of their strings, they could be played together.
El cuarto duplo en el sexto ciclo.
The fourth duplo in the sixth cycle.
Y finalmente el duplo número 5 se localiza en el séptimo ciclo.
And finally, the duplo number 5 is located in the seventh cycle.
Necesario es también esclarecer los términos sonido e intervalo.
It's important to explain the difference between sonido e intervalo, sound and interval,
ya que estamos hablando de que en la escala de 16avos de tono existen 96 intervalos en 97 sonidos.
because we have 96 intervals but 97 sounds.
Sonido es la cantidad de vibraciones por segundo que produce en este caso una cuerda.
Sound is the amount of vibrations produced by, per second, in this case by a string.
E intervalo es la distancia entre un sonido y otro sin importar los sonidos que se encuentren entre los dos.
And the interval is the distance between one sound and the other, no matter where they are placed.
De esta manera queda resuelto y clasificado científicamente el fundamento número 1 de los 3 que indica la revolución musical del sonido 13, el enriquecimiento.
Like this, it is solved and classified scientifically the fundament number 1 of the 3 that are indicated in the musical revolution of Sonido 13, the enrichment, enriquecimiento.
Resulta evidente que los 97 sonidos no pueden ser representados en el pentagrama.
It is obvious that these 97 sounds cannot be represented, cannot be written in the pentagram.
A menos que fuera por medio de una simbología extremadamente complicada.
Unless you were using a very extreme complicated symbology.
Dificultando en gran manera la facilidad para su interpretación.
So to making it more difficult the easiness of its interpretation.
Por lo tanto, se desecha el empleo del pentagrama con gran parte de su simbología, utilizando en lo sucesivo una línea horizontal y números.
This is why we are not employing the pentagram with part of its symbology, using from now on one horizontal line and numbers.
Hemos recurrido a la función de los números aplicando la siguiente ley.
We have gone to the function of numbers, applying the following law.
Se emplearán números en orden progresivo como sonidos equidistantes existan dentro del duplo.
We will use numbers in the progressive order, like sounds between the existing in the duplo.
Pudiendo así identificar los sonidos que compongan nuestra escala microtonal o dodecafónica.
Like being possible to identify the sounds compounding any scale, microtonal or dodecaphonic. This is very strange.
Ahí está.
Aquí.
La otra.
¿Está? Sí. Okay.
La de atrás nomás, la de abajo.
So this is the example.
De la misma manera que se...
Para que lo vean. Pausa para que vean el ejemplo.
Okay. So this is the example of the new way of writing for this system.
When you said pentagram, do you mean
The 5 lines.
5
Not in
lines.
silent. How do you staff? Of course, yeah. Sorry, I was using the Greek word. The staff.
De la misma manera que se escribe la escala de 16avos de tono y todas las escalas microtonales a partir del tercio de tono o cualquiera que tenga intervalos no relacionados con los tonos ni semitonos, se escribe también la escala de dodecafónica.
In the same way that you are writing this 16th of a tone and all the other microtonal scales, from 1/3 of a tone, or any other that has intervals not related to the tones or semitones. It can be also the dodecaphonic scale.
Ahí está el ejemplo. En pantalla.
Okay, great.
Para determinar el ciclo que se interpretará una obra, bastará con indicarlo al principio cada vez que se cambie de ciclo, siendo suficiente anotando la altura del ciclo con un paréntesis a la derecha para evitar confundirlo con un sonido.
So to determine the cycle in which the work will be performed, it will be enough to indicate it at the beginning of each time that you're changing the cycle, being enough to annotate the pitch of the cycle with a using a parenthesis at the right side to avoid to confuse it with the sound.
Y esto indicará que se interpretarán los sonidos ubicados en el primero, cuarto y segundo ciclo sucesivamente.
So on this example, like the one before, so like this, you can see that the sounds are located in the first cycle, they indicated in the fourth cycle, and on the second cycle in this example.
En cuanto a la simbología musical, se emplean las figuras que a continuación se muestran.
Concerning musical symbology, it will be employed the following figures.
Los silencios se identifican por el valor de la figura sin el número o sonido.
And rests will be identified by the value of the figure without number or sound.
Se emplean los reguladores para disminuir o aumentar el matiz de los sonidos.
So this crescendo and decrescendo will be employed to as in traditional writing.
De igual manera, la intensidad
And in the same way, intensity. So it's S for suave, soft. M, medio. We should go. No. Okay, there's no image, but this is. I mean, from my perspective, this is very Mexican to translate everything to connect it to the folk. Which is suave, S, medium with M, and then F,
like strong.
Fuerte, strong, yeah, forte, everything translated into Spanish.
Deslizado.
So, deslizado, glissando, for music, in music terms.
Esta ley cumple el principio de la simplificación.
So, this corresponds to the principle of simplification.
En relación a la purificación de las escalas,
So, in relation to the purification of the scales,
actualmente se encuentra en desarrollo el proyecto de la destemperación musical en un recinto de investigación de física musical ubicado en Suiza.
It is currently located. They are developing currently the project of untempering the music in a center of investigation of musical physics located in Switzerland.
Esto es solo una muestra de la inmensidad de la revolución musical llamada Sonido 13.
So this is only a small show of the immensity of this revolution, this musical revolution called Sonido 13.
Que México aporte al arte musical y su desarrollo a nivel mundial.
That Mexico is giving to the musical arts and its international development.
Este instrumento musical llamado arpa microtonal
This musical instrument called microtonal harp, arpa microtonal,
fue construida por el maestro Hugo Vargas Olvera, aquí presente,
was built by Maestro Hugo Vargas Olvera, here with us.
y está creada bajo los conceptos teórico-musicales que nos legara nuestro ilustre maestro Julián Carrillo Trujillo.
And follows the concepts theory musical that our maestro Julián Carrillo left for us.
A continuación, el maestro Vargas tendrá el honor de presentar una improvisación musical para este importante evento. Muchas gracias.
And now Maestro Vargas will present us a musical improvisation to finish this lecture. Thank you very much. So Johannes will present now the questions. And maybe you might need me as a translator. I will.
First, I myself have a question to this instrument. I see there are several rows with a special length. There are several lengths here. So from the side you can see that this is half of one string, one and the other. That's it. Yeah. From here to here.
Yeah.
So that's the reason. So there are different octaves on this instrument.
Yeah, that's the cycles.
The cycles.
Yes, that's different. En el vídeo se contestó la pregunta.
Ah, ok.
Que ha dicho que sí, que ve que la mitad de la cuerda, que aquí aquí.
Y cruzamiento.
Ah, claro. Entonces ha comprendido un poquito mejor lo que significaba cycle como pregunta.
You must have a look at the instrument afterwards. It's really interesting. And it's
¿La vas a usar para la jam session hoy?
para la que... por sí.
Okay,
Sí.
so this is another concept. So for the jam session, I mean, yes, yeah. I mean, it has to be with us, yeah.
I think it's a work of art.
Yes, it's amazing.
And it's amazing to listen to be played.
Yes.
How sensitive is it when moving, and how long does it take to retune?
Cómo es de sensible el arpa y cuando la transporta de un sitio a otro y cuánto tiempo hay que afinarla y algún detalle sobre la afinación del arpa.
Obviamente pudo haber estado bajo los sonidos porque precisamente como es nuevo el instrumento, se va acomodando la madera y las cuerdas obviamente se tienen que adaptar. Entonces pudo haber estado simplemente muy aproximado, no tiene que ajustarse todavía.
Yeah, it is possible that it's not completely exact because it's a new instrument and because of the transportation, the wood made the sounds actually a little lower. It could be possible. I don't know if someone, we are the microtoners here, if we didn't hear it, I think, yeah.
I have a very simple question. How do you tune according to computational tuning programs?
¿Y en qué proceso utiliza para afinarlo?
Con una aplicación, con un afinador eléctrico para poder que me marca las frecuencias de cada uno de los sonidos.
Yeah, using different frequencies. Christian?
Okay, about the orientation. Horizontally, how to do it? Is there something written on it? Where do you see where you are exactly?
¿Cómo te puedes orientar solo?
No te preocupes si no somos demasiado aquí. Yo voy a continuar si no lo vamos a marear, ¿vale?
No se ha venido para ver, pero vamos
vale. Yeah, sorry, I got confused. Again, the question, how the distribution?
Yes, how to see where you are. On the piano, of course.
¿Cómo te orientas a la hora de tocar?
Como se mencionó en la exposición, este es el ciclo 1.
So this is cycle 1 or an octave.
Ciclo 2.
So this is the second cycle.
Ciclo 3.
This is the third one because I mean you have to come and see it. Actually, this is fascinating.
Only pick one pitch of every cycle.
Ciclo 4.
Pueden tocar de cada ciclo, pueden tocar. So this is cycle 1. So this is 2, this is 3, and 4 and 5. The strings, I mean, if you come closer, the strings are distributed in this way. So you have some here and another cycle here.
But cycles 2 and 3 are crossing here. So below is the second cycle, isn't it?
Yes.
This here,
yes.
And upwards is the third, and then the fourth and the fifth.
So then there are numbers.
Si después en la partitura me dice que el ciclo 1 cuerda 80, toco la cuerda 80.
Yeah, so if it's written like we saw in this example, first cycle, string 80, so I'm gonna play first cycle, string 80. So my first experience with yeah, so fifth cycle, note number 72.
Y sucesivamente un número
So
para
we
cada
can
cuerda.
make kind of a bingo.
That's A 70.
Yes, it's very, very practical.
And Eleni wanted to introduce you to the public, but I have no signs here.
Okay,
so you are Greek, of course.
I'm Greek. I am a composer. This is priority number 1, and I'm sorry for the rescheduling, but I have a concert of my own on Sunday in Freiburg. Also microtonal music if you want to come there. So I have to do it today, but we still stay in America side. And I am actually starting my PhD on Partch, and the reason is the instruments are being rebuilt by Thomas Meixner. He is a percussionist playing for Musikfabriken, and he actually started a project in 2008 that was more or less completely 2013. and they actually rebuilt all the instruments of Harry Partch in Europe. I think at that time they possessed more than 50 pieces. I slightly changed the title because I was too optimistic in the beginning of what someone can actually present in a 40 minutes presentation and make sense for the audience. So I was fascinated by the music first that I heard by Partch, and I tried then to see it in detail, and then I reached a dead end, which I will explain here. So before I continue, I want to know who have ever seen a Harry Partch instrument? Okay, more or less all of you. This is for and on the 7th day petals fell in Petaluma. Actually, it's a Musikfabrik, the new version 2013, and I chose that. It's a miniature. Actually, we will come back to see how this piece is constructed. And it more or less contains the whole instrumentarium that exists, so it's interesting to see. Before I play that, we have the percussion instruments. Here we have the kind of pianos that are called the chromelodions too, and then we have the guitars here, and some cannons, the string instruments, so I think it's good to hear. The structure of the presentation would be a small introduction in his theoretical system, and the theoretical system is the basis why he needed to construct his own instruments, and then we will see the theoretical system into representation instruments of him, a percussion and a string one. The first one is the very easy instrument to understand the language, and the second is more complicated, and we will see that in combination with his music. I'm a little bit technical, so I hope that it will be clear enough. So, a composer that is an outsider, if we can tell it like this, and it's he actually acted and lived in the beginning of the late century. And sometime around the 30s, he ran into a Helmholtz book on the cessation of a tone. And then he was influenced by that book, and actually he created his own scale, consists of 43 tones, and based on overtone and undertone series until the 11th limit, which means the 1st, the 3rd, the 5th, the 7th, the 9th and the 11th overtone, and their mirrored intervals, the undertone. And as basis of his system, he used the tone G or Sol. So the overtone structure he calls O tonality, and the undertone structure is U tonality. And these tones are expressed in ratios. What the ratios are fractions with numerator that shows the overtone and denominator that shows the undertone. The fractions that he uses, the ratios, are independent on the octave. That means that all of the 43 tones can fit in an octave, and then the octaves are independent of the construction of the instrument. The main instrument is the diamond marimba, and this is the representation of the system. So we have actually only the 29 of the 43 scales in diagonal axis. That means that all these wooden blocks here are Gs, 1 to 1, 5 to 5, 3 to 3, 7 to 7, 9 to 9, and 11 to 11. And going diagonally upwards, we have the overtone scales, and diagonally downwards, we have the undertone scales. So, could anyone answer me what the sound result is? We will calculate that later.
It's not linear like this instrument. It's not linear like a scale like that instrument.
No, it's not linear.
I see you've got following the red a major third, a fifth, seventh.
Major third, fifth. Oh, sorry, where is the magenta? It's major. Okay, maybe also here. Major third, fifth, seventh, ninth, 11. And major third downwards, fifth downwards, seventh, ninth, and 11th. In order to translate that system, I propose, and this comes a little bit in combination with what we heard in the first section of how we renotate that music. First of all, I'm definitely sure, although I never met him in person, that he would probably kill me because he was so obsessed with the ratios and he was against any other approximation, renotation, accidentals, as well as center representation. But in order for me to have a map in translated his music, I proposed that system. And only between us, because the notation of that music, I made John Schneider, he was one of his assistants and students. It is more or less like a theological matter, a religion to them, and this is an approximation in 12 steps in a tone. What I call 1/4 here represents the 11th limit, that's the 11th overtone. S12 the 5, the 5th overtone or undertone, and S6 the 7th. And this is an approximation only and does not respond to the actual notes. So, the ratio calculation. If we see a 16 to 11, this is a very easy calculation. So, if we have 1G, 16 as the power of 1, is also a G in a higher octave that doesn't play any role anyway. So we have G here, and what we have to do is from this 16, that is a G, to reverse all the intervals until we reach the 11th tone. So we have downwards the octave to 2, downwards the third, the 5th to 3, the double octave to 4, and we reach this 11th undertone as a D minus 51. If we have a more complicated version, we have to calculate that in 2 steps. The first here is 11 to 10. This is not very easy to calculate at first sight. So what we have to do is first calculate the 11th overtone of G, and then take that as basis for the new calculation, calculate the 10th undertone of the 11th overtone, then we reach a minus 35 cents. Here we see how the marimba actually looks, and this is the rebuilt instrument that exists in the music fabrication at the time. And this is the way that we would transcribe all the pitches if we apply them in this 12th step of a tone microtonal notation. What I want to do is following. My professor in the Music Academy of Basel and composer, maybe you know him, maybe not, made a platform of a virtual instrument, so we will not have this one here, but it's a good platform actually to see what is happening. Hopefully I have English as well. So this is G, the basis, and we have the overtone series. minor chord, which is the reversed. And of course, you can understand with this system that starting from every undertone, we can build the overtone series and the other way around. So we have 12 tonalities. Make one way from here and come to the presentation again. So, why do we need transcription? Partch used two main notation systems. The one is that the ratios that I represented, which give exact information about the pitch, but still we have to calculate. The second way that he notated music is using tabulature, and we will see how that functions. Ideal for the performer, tabulature is the easiest system because they know exactly where to play. Absolutely no information about the pitchy sounding. For own instruments are easy to be played, but as long as I experienced that in practice, a second instrument has to come and tune together, then we have a problem if we don't know the exact pitches. So we come to the second instrument, a little bit complicated one, and it's the kithara. We see here the playing area of the kithara. The kithara was one instrument that was built originally in 1938, and Partch himself rebuilt it, corrected it for more than 20 years. All those instruments had some problems and replaced it in 1972 by the new Kithara one, which is this instrument that we're seeing. The Kithara one is not existing after the 50s. And what we see here, it's not very good to see, but it's 12 kitharas made in one. Each kithara has 6 strings, so we have 72 strings. Here, the construction of the 6 strings of the kitharas are called hexads for Partch. So the first kithara, the first hexad, the 6th, the 7th, and the 12th are near a soundboard where Pyrex rods are attached. For the guitarist, it's like the bottlenecks, it's glass tubes that are fitted between the hexad and the soundboard, and the instrument is tuned when all of them are in the upper position. The upper position is like the open strings. And tuning this instrument, we have here one. Okay. The tuning of the Kithara one. This is directly from Partch's book. What we see here is the tuning of every string of every hexad. The octaves are represented here. And of course there are some mistakes. For example, this 12 to 7 should be in a higher octave because it exists in this octave. So Partch himself made some mistakes. What we see here is that we have O or U tonalities in every hexad, and the basis, the basic tuning of every hexad applies to one of the strings. And the rest of them, for example here that we have 8 to 7 O, the rest of them are overtones of 8 to 7, while here that we have U 11 to 8, all the other strings are reversed intervals of the overtone tonality for the second hexad. This looks complicated, this looks easy on the other way, and this is how Partch notated the music. So what he did a mapping of writing the hexad in Arabic numbering. This is hexad 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the bullets show the indicated strings. This is the 6th and lowest string, this is the 1st and highest string. So, if we see, for example, this kind of notation, we have the 4th hexad, the performer knows exactly where to play, and putting in a 5-line stave the notes. This indicates the lowest string and this the highest. So the importance is, of course, that we don't get any information by looking at the score, so we need the transcriptions in order to understand what parts wanted to compose. And we come again to the first piece, that is 7th on the 7th day. This is a piece that consists of 34 miniatures, from duet to octet, and contains most of his instruments. And I'm coming a little bit back and forth. This is the original score. Here we see verse number 9, it's a duet, with quarter equals 90. So the verse number 1 is played by harmonic canon 1 and guitar 1, vertically, like this, and continues to the next page. When verse 9 finishes, then verse 10 is to play. That's a duet. And diamond, marimba, and bow are playing. When this finishes, continues to the best, comes verse 11, 12, etc. When we come to verse 28, the whole thing should be played vertically. That is another aspect in Partch music. We have two different tempi. This is played in quarter like 90, this is played in quarter plus 1/16th note equals 96. That means that the quarter equals 120. The combination here is 3 to 4, and because of the grouping, it's much more difficult for the people to synchronize. This beat should come to the second 16th note of the last group, so there are more complex aspects in the music rather than language. But coming back to the guitar 1, we see here what the performer has to play, and going here we see what the actual sound would be. So, a step further, we have the Pyrex Rode movement additionally to the guitar, and what they are doing, they produce slides, glissandi, when they are moved upwards and downwards to the indicated hexads. In order to see that, I chose a piece that is called Study for Harmonic Canon 1 and Guitar 1, that was composed in the early 60s and was considered to be a draft that was used later in this bigger work end of the 7th day. And these are the measures 28 to 35. What we see here is that we have to perform an arpeggio by having the Pyrex Rode in the 4/3 position. Green hexad is the hexad number 1, and make a downwards movement of the Pyrex Rode to a new position 5/3. This is a little bit more complicated. Looking at this box that is green and blue, we have the same hexad green, a movement from 5/3 to 16 to 11. The translation is following. The first hexad green has this following tuning. Pyrex Rode is in position 5/3 and has to be moved in 16 to 11. And how we calculate this? Let's consider that A is the basic tuning of the hexad, in this case it's 8 to 7, B1 is the actual position of the Pyrex Rode. To calculate the transposition interval, we have to divide the actual position to the basic tuning and then multiply this result to every string to see how the strings will sound. Quite a complex process that I've done here for you. So the transposition interval from the original to the first position is 35 to 24 in ratios, and to the second position 14 to 11. What I actually spent a long time doing was this job. I did it for all the key hexads that have a Pyrex Rode for all the guitar models, and we see that the glissando is downwards from this to this. And in order to see how this looks like. Probably an automatization would be nice in case I have the opportunity to work with a programmer in the future, and it would be nice if there would be a transcription of a whole piece of parts. And here is the renotation of the measures 28 to 35. Here we see this position that I talked before, and by bringing the notes in the same octave, we have actually this. What we have is 3 chords that have very slight differences but completely different constellation. We will hear this example, but this is what Partch called tonality flux. This is a harmonical phenomenon that he was very fond of. I'm more inclined to think in terms of what I call tonal flux rather than the use implication of progression or modulation. Here is an example, the diagram on page 188 of my book, which I have used in at least 2 pieces of music, 2 triads with each voice moving by about 1/3 of a semitone in one direction or the other. 8 to 7 O tonality and 7 to 4 U tonality. What he tries to explain here is that he has the slightest move in different direction, but in the end he has a different constellation of a kind of major or a minor chord. And this is the chords that I described. This is a different tonality flux. We see here that the first voice is going downwards in 53 cents, that is highly bigger than a quarter of a tone. The second voice is moved by 4 cents, which is more or less audible, we'll see now, and the third voice or the bassist is moved by 32 cents, 1/6 of the tone. So, having all 3 chords, to tell me if you notice any difference. Played by heart. Then only the bassist and the third of the chord, the third and the second, only the third and the fifth, and only the middle voice, so that you can tell me if you hear any difference. So, the instruments and how they're used in today's music, his original are existing in University of Washington in Seattle and are hardly playable. They are more a museum exhibit than played instrument, partly destroyed and impossible to be moved. So Musikfabrik made a good job, and we have a replicate in Europe. Of course, they can not only use for performing Partch music, but new compositions can be composed for those instruments. And the transcription could help first analyzing Partch music, but also use modern instruments in combination with those instruments or compose new music. And of course, this is a good recommendation that performers would learn to play on them, because the people in Musikfabrik play other instruments, and in their free time they are practicing those instruments, but the education for that system is not there. And I think that it is an interesting research for musicologists, composers and performers. What I wanted to present you is a YouTube video of the whole instrumentarium process made by Musikfabrik, and I think it's interesting if we have time. Do we have time? Okay, it's like a 10-minute video, so hope you enjoy.
Ja, also das, was wir hier heute machen in der Glaswerkstatt, ist eben das Aufsägen dieser Glasflaschen, die Partch in dem Instrument Cloud Chamber Bowls verwendet hat. Das kann man hier auf so einer ganz alten Fotografie vielleicht gerade noch sehen. Es sind aufgesägte Flaschen, wo die Böden und aber auch die Oberteile nach dem Sägen an Seilen aufgehängt werden und mit verschiedenen Schlägeln an verschiedenen Stellen angeschlagen werden. Also die Flaschen müssen quergelegt werden und dann muss man überlegen, wie man die Schwingungen halt dämmt. Und es gibt immer einen Moment, wo man dann den Schlitz ganz rumgeführt hat, wenn dann nur noch so ein kleines Stückchen übrig ist. Das letzte Stück aufzutreiben, ist ein sehr kritischer Moment, da kann es dann passieren, dass das Glas eben bricht.
This shows a picture. This is the opening noise. It's just a white noise. This shows you the fundamental frequency, and these other lines here are the overtones that are present in the sound. You see what's interesting about these big bells is usually that the first overtone is almost always more present than the actual fundamental. Good, 137 hertz. This is our largest bell, and it's going to go down on that lower right-hand corner. I've written down the number of the bell, the frequency that we actually measured the bell, and this is the frequency that it should be. So as you see, some of them don't exactly match. We're going to try to tune them as much as we can. You can only tune them going up, not going down. We can't make the bells any bigger than they already are. We can only cut them off. Hopefully we'll have something, a very close approximation of the pitches we need.
I started working with Harry when I was young, and he had the pitches written on the bowls of what they were.
Just to stop, he got the heritage of parts of having the instruments, and he worked with Thomas Meixner until 2013, where he died. So we have first source of parts information of how he wanted the instruments.
And I always felt weird because I would play the pitch and I didn't hear the pitches that were on there. And I figured because he was the expert and I was 17 that I just needed to improve my ears. But when I when I received the instruments years later, I was patient and I took the time and my ears are better. And I said to myself, the pitches that are written on there aren't the pitches that you had, that it said, and it was very mysterious to me, and I ended up concluding that Harry wrote down the pitches he wanted to hear, but not necessarily the pitches that there were. Now, the bowls have broken through the years, and we don't have the technology. I'd like to find out how these are tuned, because I don't know how to do it, because we've always done what Harry wrote down to do, which is that when you cut a bowl, and when one breaks and you cut a bowl, then you put it in where it goes from, high to low, and you have a set of beautiful glass gongs, and you rewrite the part to fit the new bowl.
Spoils of War. Zuerst mal hier die Bassmarimba-Platte. Dann gibt es die Instrumente, nach denen das Spoils auch benannt ist. Dann hier auf der rechten Seite ein Guero. Linke Seite Woodblock. Darunter haben wir die Bamboo Marimba Instrumente. Die Glasglocken auf der linken Seite, eine hohe vorne, tiefe hinten. Der rechten Seite genauso, hohe vorne. Und die Bleche, von denen wir jetzt nur 2 hier aufgehängt haben. Okay, es gibt das Pult dahinter, diese ganzen Stimmmechaniken, die beiden äußeren Flügel, unten die Resonanzkörper. Im Prinzip sind es 12 hintereinander gestellte Gitarren. Ja? Also wir haben immer hier Bahnen von 6 Saiten, die allerdings in einer ganz bestimmten Weise gestimmt sind. Das, was man hier sieht, das haben die Spieler jetzt selbst gemacht, denn es geht bei Partch natürlich immer darum, diese Ratios zu spielen, bestimmte Tonverhältnisse, deswegen sieht man hier so ganz viele Brüche und man kann eben auf diesen Flächen jetzt diese Pyrex-Stäbe bewegen und solche Klänge erzeugen.
It's 2 minutes only, but I don't know why is that happening. I suppose. Yes.
I changed to the internet. Are you using Mikrotöne? The net?
I'm in Edu actually because I'm studying, so I don't have a problem with Mikrotöne. So I don't know why.
Do you want to change the microtones? Oh.
Do we have time?
You have 5 minutes for the questions.
And what is the password?
It's still recognizing the net. Okay, now yes.
Okay, so we were somewhere like here.
Das, was ich in Amerika gesehen hatte, das ist hier etwas anders konstruiert. Es gibt dort, weiter unten, hat er Löcher gebohrt und hat auf der Innenseite eine Metallschiene. Das Ganze hat aber zur Folge gehabt, dass durch den immensen Zug die Resonatoren noch ein bisschen beschädigt sind. Und er hat dann im Prinzip Drähte genommen. Zum Teil Klavierdraht oder alte, dicke Cello-Saiten. Wir haben jetzt hier aus einem Messingstab etwas machen lassen, was einfach viel besser diese Spannung hält. Und hier im oberen Bereich gibt es ein kleines Loch, da ist das Ende von der Gitarrenseite befestigt, wird dann hier durchgeführt über einen kleinen Steg. Kann man hier gerade noch sehen, weil hier 2 von den Brettchen fehlen. Das ist dann hier der Steg, da läuft die Seite drüber und überträgt dann eben auf diese Holzresonanzkisten den Klang, wie bei der Gitarre eigentlich.
Thank you very much.
I think there will be a lot of questions now. It would be best if we could have one of the guitars here to show the whole instrument and to touch the strings and how to tune it. As I got to know, the tuning is not the same always, and not the same tuning as Harry Partch put down as his genesis of a music. And other pieces he uses other tunings for the guitar. But there are so many interesting instruments you have seen in the last pictures, and it would be charming to play them. That's only. But we have to go to Cologne, to Köln, where the instruments are in the Musikfabrik. But as I know, some of them are in the cellar and not ready to play now. Only when we have a big concert, as it had been 2 years ago in Salzburg, the whole instruments, all instruments had been in Salzburg in alten Kinosaal, Stadtkinosaal. And we heard then this on the 7th day, Peters Tarantella, and it was the best piece I ever heard in this kind of music. Well, there are questions, of course, and Eleni, you try to answer.
Thank you so much. Very, very interesting. All really fascinating. I have more 3 sort of comments which are related to what you said. First of all, I'll make it very short for the time. Speaking of the instruments, the problem is that, of course, as you mentioned, or in the field, it was mentioned in relation to the cloud chamber bowls, is that many of them are imperfect. So based on Partch tuning system, or Partch intonational system, 11 limit just intonation, or 43 tone to octave, they can't be tuned exactly according to that. But that's one problem. The second problem is that Partch music doesn't sound just in tone. At 99% of that, it sounds like so much glissando and a percussive pattern throughout the time. To me, only the times that he uses choromelodion, he uses 1 ratio on the choromelodion, on the organ, we hear real just intonation, real just ratio. So these are this problem with Partch instruments. Otherwise, it doesn't really sound just. I don't hear just intonation ratios at all in Partch music. 99% of the time.
I'll try to answer. This is a good point because I'm doing the analysis on the actual music that he wrote. He's using major and minor chords or melodies as we know it from the Western music, but detuned. So he is not using that in that context. They are detuned in just intonation, but he doesn't use it as microtonal music as this instrument. So we still have a Western impact, you just don't hear it tuned in a tempered equal temperament that we know.
I'm not talking about equal temperament at all. I'm saying that those minor and major hexads.
Yeah.
So we have not triads but hexads, because it goes up to the 11th harmonic, so we can have just or pure hexads, but they don't sound pure because of the perfections of the instruments, but also the texture of the music. So equal temperament is totally something else. So I was just confirming what was in the movie and what you just said. There are a lot of imperfections with the instruments, but also the way the music sounds. The second point was you mentioned that transcribing the music might simplify the possibility of combining his instruments with kind of usual Western instruments. In fact, Partch himself does that. In his music dramas, in Oedipus, in The Bewitched, or in instrumental pieces, like San Francisco is not instrumental, it's a small voice and instrumental, but also the Ulysses departs from the edge of the world. He has clarinets, normal clarinet, cellos, saxophones, trumpets, and when you see the score, he has the combination of the normal Western notation, as you were saying, with the tablature, with the ratios, and with the combination of the Western notation with the ratios, which is, as you said, it took a lot of time, a lot of months for Dean Drummond or for Danley Mitchell or Ben Johnson, all the people to learn the whole system, to learn the notation, to learn how to play. So I just wanted to mention that Partch actually does that. He combines Western usual instruments quite often with his own constructed instruments.
Partch played himself, and he had his family, what he considered family, what was his ensemble. Nowadays, if you have a conductor that comes from far away and tries to read the score and contact instrument, it's impossible if you don't know what it sounds. I have been, because Musikfabrik commissions pieces to new composers.
A little bit louder,
yes, I have been to rehearsals from Musikfabrik, which commissioned pieces for arts, instruments and normal, and it's like, okay, what do you play, what can you tune together, what ratio do you, if there are no Western music or at least a Zen notation, then there is the chaos, because people don't know the instruments. Partch himself knew exactly what it should sound like, and I am not that sure if he actually theoretically, yes, but practically, for example, his lipo songs, you never listen what is written, so I don't know if that was that important. This is another question. But nowadays, it's essential in order to understand the music or tune, or for the musician as well to know what the colleague is playing on the other side. These are the problems that exist when the people don't have the knowledge of or the experience of playing the instrument and know exactly what a 5-to-3 ratio represents. They have to have a combination with Western notation, and that is why I use the approximation. But I will say again, this is against Partch's idea. Yes.
I had the same discussion with Dean Drummond 8 years ago, and for me it was impossible to use these instruments for music. Something happens by chance, but it is not. You can play the U and O. Yes, overtones and undertones, and that's part of our music, of course, but you can use that if you know how to use that in the instruments. And so it's an extraordinary, necessary work you do, that this music is better to understand, especially for composers. As I heard from Steen Andersen, the composition for the ensemble Musikfabrik with his instruments, and he only used the bass marimba and the blue boy. It was nothing. It hasn't taken the time to study these instruments and the music of Partch. This is necessary to study it and to understand it, so we can use these instruments till today and tomorrow.
I have one question. I see that you are using Partch system. So it's pretty clear how he's using overtonality because it's based on harmonics, on overtone and stuff. But is there any physical ground for utonality? Because it doesn't appear in nature. It must be some kind of believable, simply mathematical logic of inversions. What is his? He didn't say nothing about it.
No, he actually uses the reversed intervals of the autotonality technique. The only thing that I show people can answer that the utonality produced is for high pressure on a string instrument. For example, a cello can produce subtones, or a violin. The bigger instruments are better, but still the sound is not enough strong and clear so that we can take them into consideration as undertones, but they are still existing in that way. Partch didn't use them that way.
If I may, you're absolutely right, that it doesn't have any acoustic basis, but its root goes back to the 19th century. Von Oettingen in the harmonic system in Duala and Entwicklung for the first time proposes this idea of the duality of major and minor.
Dominant major and subdominant minor.
Which is exactly Partch's idea. Well, Partch just takes the idea.
Maybe he gave some ideas on where should be the root. If you take strings, you can go just longer and longer, then it's no problem. But if you have sound, where should you go longer?
Yes.
Maybe in air or something.
It is possible if you know that the sound is in the frequencies of sound from 0 to infinity. And the music we hear, the autonality, these are the sounds with ratios higher than 1, from 1 to infinity. And from 0 to 1, there are the undertones. They are not to hear, but with the use to octave them, to put on an octave or 2 octaves higher, we hear these like this 8, 16, 11th parts. This is an undertone. And it's this ratio, for example, is part of a scale, undertone scale, which shows us exactly the minor scales. The minor scales, we must read it like a mirror from the overtone scale. The basic tone is on top in the underground scale.
Yeah, I understand. We are using all of them in everyday's music, not only microtonal music. In every music, we are using inversions. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any fourth, because fourth is never happening in overtones. It's always happening in undertones. Fourth doesn't exist in overtones, but we are using fourth as well. But we are not speaking about autonality and utonality. But he was separating this very clearly. So that's why I'm asking: is he separating clearly because of the practical harmony system? Or he's separating it clearly because he believes that there are grounds on which they could be logically explained. This was my question.
I'm not sure I can answer 100%, but they wanted in the end the tonality flux is. I think that this is a really strong basis on the system. He wanted pitches to be slightly detuned, but then have another constellation, and that is turning the minor into major and the other way around, but keeping small distances on the notes by different directions. So what interested him is that we hear in the melody that not that much happened, but if we hear it vertically, we have a major and a minor constellation and this is what is fascinating.
I understand.
Sure, it's just, I'm sure you know, and probably many of you know this, from the ancient documentary, the old documentary that was still made with him. There is a part with the commentary where I don't remember the name of who was explaining, but it's more that flux, I think, from keeping a difference, having a slight difference, and not really has a theoretical basis. Although in the documentary, I'm not the expert you are, but in the documentary we see a lot that he inspires in many things that he thinks that comes from Greek theories and so on. So in his imaginary, I do imagine that.
There are a lot of things not explained in his Genesis. So things he just writes, but without going further.
Even other instruments, the things that where he uses the bottles, the guitar, the bottles that it just produces slightly different pitches and so on. We cannot forget his life story, right? That we were just mentioning in the beginning. I'm sure that many things can.
if I'm allowed one or two things, he was considered to be a little bit of a lunatic, and I think he was a strong personality. For example, this instrument with the bottles, I had a discussion with Tomax, I don't know if you know that. He was a good drinker at that time, so he collected the bottles that he drank, and that sounds good, what it sounds like. By reconstructing the instrument, this is a problem because the bottles are not existing, what he used to drink in the 50s. So they made an agreement in a bar that every bottle that was empty, they would take it and test it, and they gathered like thousands of bottles in order to find some of the appropriate ones, at least in the tuning, because the material and the color is another thing.
And burrs of lamps they used for some instruments.
And for the guitar, that's the same. He himself writes, because I'm analyzing this instrument, that he saw a replica of a vase that exists in a British museum, and he thought that if the ancient Greeks would produce a harp or a guitar, in this case it would be like this. How real that is, or how historically accurate, I have no idea. He didn't as well.